All right, the light on my computer says we're recording, so so this should be, by the time it airs, which will be either Thursday or Friday, episode 29 of what we're calling Both Laugh, the Dying Scene Quarantine Chat Show. It's technically like the 30 or 31st one we've done, but I'm kind of airing a few of them out of order. So I think this is officially episode 29 in the books. And I am really beyond thrilled to have two guests for only the second time, Dave Walsh and $1 Million Matt Hock from one of my favorite new bands, Space Cadet. And everybody knows you from The Explosion, and we'll get into that. But Space Cadet is a really cool project, and I'm super excited to do this. So, gentlemen, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, man.
When I started doing this sort of interview show, transitioning from a writer to doing whatever this is, it started really during the beginning of quarantine, because we couldn't go to shows anymore and the website had crashed. So I needed something to sort of do. And I wanted to talk to people who at first who had plans during the early part of 2020 that kind of went sideways. Obviously you couldn't be on the road and whatever. And then sort of it has morphed into, as the year has gone on, talking to people who actually did cool and fun and creative stuff during quarantine to keep busy and whatever. And you guys sort of check both boxes, because the very first show that got canceled was the show that I was supposed to see both of you at, opening for Dave Hause at the Sinclair in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I drove by the venue because I was working in Harvard Square that day. I drove by the venue and they had the sign up. It said 312 Dave Hause, The Explosion. I was like, oh shit, it might actually happen. And then it didn't.
Yeah, pride for the best, but a bummer.
Yeah.
It was, Jason, it was so close to happening. I mean, we were literally halfway to Cambridge from New York City, which we had played the night before. And we were halfway, somewhere in Connecticut, and we got the final call. I think actually, Matt, tell me if I'm right about this. Did Dave call the show? Dave Hause was the guy who said we can't do this show.
Yeah.
And
I think after probably some deliberation with the club about what the right thing to do was. We were in Connecticut. Dave and I had driven up separately from the other guys, and we had left early because we wanted to go hang out in Harvard Square.
Yeah.
And do old, cool, fun stuff. Get Anna's Taqueria, and which is the best restaurant in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's what we get for being punctual, because I was in my home, then we left my home, and then I was super far from my home. Fortunately for Dave, he was halfway home.
Yeah, right.
I was literally, I think, exactly halfway point home, and then the show got called off, and I was like, well, shit, that sucks. Because that would have been the first time The Explosion had played in Boston in maybe, what do you think, Matt, 15 years or more?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I was trying to remember and I couldn't. So
yeah,
I
can't remember. I can't remember at all. Anything. Yeah.
What did you guys have on the radar? If we can rewind the tape to 13 months ago, what else did you have on the radar for 2020? Had all things gone according to plan? Did you have other Explosion stuff lined up after the Dave Hause shows, or what did you end up missing?
We ended up missing. We were going to do some 20th anniversary shows of Flash. A handful on the East Coast, a handful on the West Coast, and we were trying to play Chicago as well. So that got fucked up. But we had already started. We had started writing Space Cadet stuff in January of 2020. So that's like you were saying earlier, we fit kind of both criteria of what this thing is. It applies to that too, because we were writing this stuff, but then we just kept writing this stuff. We didn't have to do anything. There's nothing to do. There was nothing else we wanted to do necessarily, as aside from those shows. But
yeah, the shows were supposed to happen in the summer, I think, in July, August. Like the explosion shows got like, I think delayed, like they may happen this summer, although I highly doubt it.
I don't think so.
Were
Yeah,
those
I
ever
don't-
even
I-
announced at first? Because I don't remember hearing that.
No,
Okay.
No, they weren't. They hadn't been announced yet. So
I guess here you heard it here first.
Right.
yeah.
That maybe someday there will be 21st
Yeah.
anniversary shows.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, what's 21st anniversary doesn't really have the romance. It's
Right.
you got to be
So-
in fives, I think.
Oh, that's not
Sure.
true, because the Avail reunion shows that they did, whatever, a year and a half ago now, I think it was for like the 18th anniversary of Over the James or something like that.
Well,
Oh,
it
really?
it was kind of arbitrary, honestly.
yeah.
Like, whatever.
Well, and I love Avail. We love those guys. But I don't know that that is a valid number for celebration. Frankly.
My sense is that it seemed like like a reason to get the band back together. Essentially, it was like
Yeah.
it was going to be the 18th anniversary of one, or the 14th of another one, or the 21st of another one. So just pick an
Yeah.
album that everybody wants to
Yeah,
hear.
I appreciate the kind of breaking convention on that, though. I
Yeah.
also appreciate like reasons to do things. So more power to them.
There is
I'm
something
just- I
about
like-
the 5-year increment thing, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm old fashioned that way, I guess.
So you mentioned that you started writing Space Cadet like a year ago. How did that project come together? If people haven't heard the 2 singles yet, and we'll get into some of the deeper album cuts because it's a really cool and different album. But if people are expecting the Explosion Part 2 or whatever, like that's not what Space Cadet is. So how did the sort of re-collaboration come?
Yeah, so Dave and I were actually writing some Explosion songs. I love watching YouTube guitar videos. It's my favorite thing to do. I do it every morning. It's how
Yeah.
it's like my ritual every morning.
Yeah.
And I was watching some videos about pedals, and there was this like pedal, whatever, it doesn't matter what it was. It was a Beatronics pedal, just for those who care. But the person reviewing the pedal was like, this pedal is not for everyone, and it might not even be for anyone, but it is for like anyone who wants to just kind of experiment. So I was like, I'm gonna take like that to heart a little bit, and I'm just gonna play stuff with like just different effects in GarageBand that I wouldn't normally use. I started playing a riff, and Forever for a While was like basically mostly written. Like the song was, the important parts, all the integral parts were there like that day. So I sent it to Dave because he's the best, like to send stuff to and talk about. And he's like, the working title of the song was Space Cadet because it sounded just, I don't know, it sounded whatever that meant to me at the moment. That's
right.
what it was called. He's like, dude, we should do a project called Space Cadet. And Dave happened to have a song called Dave.
Bad luck.
That's right. That was a segue attempt.
Yeah, so Bad Luck is a song I had written kind of like before, like I think I wrote it like maybe a year and a half ago, and it was kind of just like, or maybe it was like 2 years ago. I was down in Asbury Park for a little while, and I was like writing some music down there, and I got together with some guys down there and demoed the song that I'd written. I was like listening to a lot of the Rolling Stones and the Stone Roses at the time, and it kind of had that vibe. And so I demoed it and I had it, and I was like, Matt had written a few songs by this point in January. And I was like, oh, maybe that song would work in this project, And so I showed it to Matt. He was like, it definitely could. And then so it was like, all right, now we have like I think it was like 2 or 3 songs at that point.
Yeah. But yeah, we had a bunch of songs pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like
we got really fired up about it, especially because it was quarantine. Like my work that I do, or I did, was I'm like an AV technician. So I do audio and video for big events here in Massachusetts where I live. And that industry kind of went away with COVID. No one's having big events or parties. So I had nothing to do really. And so we just kind of started working, sending things back and forth, making plans. not making plans to play a show or anything, but we started just making plans about recording and just being a band and what cool things we could do while we were in quarantine.
Yeah, and we started talking to Pete Steinkopf, who produced the record, pretty early along in the process. Probably like 3 songs in, like we knew we wanted to work with Pete, so we started sending stuff to him. So he's like, he recorded the record, but he was along for the ride, like not the whole time, but much of it.
And he sort of got like initially what you guys were trying to do.
Yeah,
it's a little outside of the Pete Steinkopf. I love Pete. I think he's a great producer and he's a wonderful human. It's a little outside his sort of normal sounding wheelhouse too.
Yeah, it is. But he said to us, he's like, I love this is my favorite kind of stuff to record. No knock on the other stuff, of course. He loves to do everything. So he was super excited. I think he was super excited to just like use all the pedals in his studio when he probably only uses the overdrives.
Right.
So that was good.
So is that sort of a, like, once that the snowball starts at the top of the mountain and starts rolling, like once you get a song or two under your belt, did the rest of them sort of come quickly? Because it kind of breaks the restrictions on you, like if I could do this sound, well, fuck it, let me do this sound.
Absolutely, I think so.
Yeah, I
think
so.
Matt especially started writing up a storm, and I would write some stuff, and like Matt being down in Brooklyn, me being in Massachusetts, like we don't get together to write, but with the technology, obviously these days it's just super easy. So it came really quickly and naturally. I mean, Matt and I have known each other for like 25 years, so we're like brothers. It was a super easy thing to get going once like there was some excitement about the songs and excitement about Pete. And it's funny, like we were originally only going to do like record with Pete for a single. Like we were going to do like maybe 3 songs or 4 songs and release like a single and B-side or something like that. But then the time, like Pete got kind of nervous. This was like in April or something like that, when the pandemic was kind of really sketchy. Nobody knew what was going on, and he didn't feel comfortable going in. Like, isn't that right, Matt? We wanted to go in like April or May.
Yeah, because early on, I think maybe in February we had talked about recording Forever for a While and Bad Luck as a 7-inch and maybe a B-side if we had it.
Right.
Because very naively, we thought, well, maybe in April.
Right. Oh, I know.
Which is such a ridiculous, in retrospect, like what an idiot I am to even think that way at all, but whatever. No one knew what was going on. I think we can all relate to that.
Right.
So yeah, we were going to do that. And Pete was just like, and we were all just like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So we had a call with Pete, and we basically just said to Pete, okay, here's the deal. Whenever you are comfortable and we're comfortable, whenever you're comfortable opening the studio, we'll record a record instead of just doing a 7-inch.
Yeah.
Which worked out for the best, because then we had like a few more months to write a full album,
Yeah. And I think I'm really, in a way, like that's one of the good things to come out of this, is that it stopped us from doing that, because I think, like, I don't want to offend anyone, but EPs are my least favorite thing in the world, because it's like, it's the most half measure. It's not a record. It's not a single. And we're kind of getting to that point, and like, it just doesn't have the substance. It doesn't have the weight of a record. So I'm glad that we didn't record a short thing first, basically.
Yeah, because it sort of forces you to keep the project going. Whereas if you do a 2 or 3 song single and whatever, maybe that's just kind of where it lands.
Right. Yeah. The momentum could very well stop.
Right.
Which is the worst thing.
When did you end up actually going down to Asbury and recording?
Well, it's an interesting story. So I'll tell the first half, and Dave will tell the second.
Yeah.
What we determined, we talked to Pete a few times, and he was like, okay, I'm comfortable doing it at the end of July. So a long time after, I think after we'd all acclimated and to what was going on and started to understand it a little more,
Right.
We determined that at that point it'd be relatively safe to do it, and we would do it in a super safe way. So we said, okay, let's do it in July. So we went down in July. We had Matt Olsson playing bass and Mike Sneeringer on drums. So we all recorded in separate rooms. They knocked their stuff out in 2 days because they're both incredible players. I mean,
and Matt's not even a bass player by trade.
No, he's
That's
not.
a drummer, right?
He's not, and he's very good at playing bass.
For those that don't know, Matt, I first learned of him playing drums, I think, for Frankie Iero.
Yeah.
And then he was playing drums, even for Fallon, maybe. And
Yeah.
then he started playing bass. He just like learned bass to join Dave Hause on the road.
Yeah, I mean, like the guy's
That's
just
how
got
the story
rhythm
goes.
in
Yeah.
in his blood. You know, he's an incredible musician all around, and Mike's an incredible drummer. So they knocked it
Sure.
out. But Dave was unable to make it down, and I'll let him take this part of the story.
So basically, what happened was a week before I was scheduled to go to Asbury Park, I had a crazy panic attack, which is like something I'm not familiar with. I never had one before, and it was like super severe, like crazy panic attack. And like I had to go to the hospital. I went to the emergency room. I thought I was having a heart attack. I didn't know what was going on. And it just like, I don't know if anyone out there has ever had a panic attack. They just come out of nowhere. It's kind of unexplained. You know, I'm sure there's tons of reasons why you would have a panic attack, especially in a pandemic. And, you know, I kind of lost my job, and, you know, like there's a lot going on.
And yes, I've had a couple really good ones. And so, I get it.
So you understand what I'm talking about.
Sure.
So I had a panic attack, and I was like, oh, fuck, like, what is this, you know? And so I didn't go see my doctor or anything. I was like, okay, hopefully that was just it. And then the day before I was supposed to go to Asbury, I was going to drive down from Central Mass to record. I had another one, and I went to the hospital again, and I had to call Matt. I was like, listen, man, I can't come. I had another panic attack, and it was like a bad one, and I didn't know what to do. And Matt was like, all right, dude, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go down. I'm going to record my parts. And then he and I had both had the same idea. It was like, I have a home studio. Matt has a home studio. But Matt went down with Mike and Matt and recorded their parts. And I was like, all right, if Pete is amenable to this, if you guys record your parts, take your roughs from the day, email them to me. I can record here. It wasn't like I was incapacitated, like I was like you know what I mean? Like
right.
I being home.
But you were right.
Cool.
You were rightfully reluctant to travel. I mean,
sure.
Yeah. You had just had like a pretty traumatic event.
Sure.
Right. And if you know, driving down there in the middle of the pandemic, I didn't. If I were to have a panic attack by myself on the road, it would have been bad. You know, I could have crashed my car. Who knows? So anyway, the idea was, all right, I'll record my parts in my home studio. So Matt would do their parts, send it to me. I would record my parts, send it to them via email, or, you know, upload it to a cloud server. And then Pete, God bless him, he just went with it. He's like, I love the idea. He took my parts, put them in the mix, and then we just worked like that. It kind of worked out great because, you know, I was able to work on the songs that Matt and the other guys worked on the day before. So we could kind of work in tandem in a way.
Yeah, right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like we were able to get more done almost doing it that way.
Yeah, I think that actually, you know, with, you know, hindsight being 2020, I don't think that we would have gotten the record done in the time we had we all been in the same space. And it's obviously a bummer not to be in the same space. And I don't want to, you know, play that down. But, you know, we were kind of on a shoestring budget. We had a week, and it would have been a real bummer to not have accomplished what we wanted to in that week. And what would have happened, I think, is we would just gone to our respective homes and finished the tracks.
Yeah.
But there was it kind of gave it like it gave it an urgency that hadn't existed, that we didn't know existed.
Right.
And I think that was like beneficial. You know, things happen for a reason. And again, like Dave, I love you. I'm bummed you weren't there, but
Yeah.
I think the record benefited from it in a way.
In a way it did. Like, yeah, I would have loved to have been there. I love being in a recording studio. It's like one of my favorite things in the world. I was super bummed that I couldn't be there, but I just couldn't, you know, and that's just the way it shakes out. And but like we turned lemons into lemonade, you know.
That's right. When life hands you lemons, make a record.
Yeah. Exactly.
And all the best guitar parts on the record are Dave's. So it didn't really matter.
Get out of here.
Had either of you written an album sort of remotely, like sharing ideas back and forth like that? I mean, I'm sure you probably haven't recorded an album that way before, but had you written albums separately that way? Or is this the first time even doing that part?
First time.
I hadn't written a song in 15 years or something.
So where did this sort of new songwriting thing come from?
Well, I'll tell you where it came from for me.
Yeah.
We played The Explosion played 2 shows with Bad Religion in New York. One was in Manhattan and the other was in Brooklyn. It was the best tour of all time. It was a total of 4 miles.
That's
and
awesome.
2 days.
Right.
But the shows were so good. And we played Webster Hall, not Webster Hall.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, Webster Hall on like a Friday.
In Brooklyn Steel.
And then we played Brooklyn Steel on Saturday, which is an awesome venue. It's so great. And the stage is huge and it's super fun. But Brian Baker was showing everyone his stuff. He's like, check out my rig. I got all this stuff. So we're looking at all this stuff. And Dave and Chris and Damien were like, yeah, just look at all this stuff. And I was just standing there as like a dumb singer, like I want stuff.
Yeah, right.
So it kind of like the idea of like having cool gear kind of made me go buy a guitar. as fucking shallow as that sounds. But whatever. I don't care. That's the truth.
That's why I own half the guitars I have, just because somebody else has a cool guitar. And it's like, damn it, you know what? I want that.
Yeah.
No, but there was just like such an earnest moment for everyone. And I felt a little bit outside of it and I couldn't handle it, frankly.
But I mean, look what came out of it. Matt wrote like so many amazing songs, you know, like, you know, Matt's a super creative person. He always has been. So it's like, you know, he wrote amazing songs in the Explosion, and he may not have owned a guitar since like when the Explosion used to write a bunch of songs. Like he used to have some really cool guitars. Like Matt and I, like I've bought a lot of guitars off of Matt, and we always call it like Polish haggling, because Matt would like have these cool guitars and he'd have to pay rent or whatever. He's like, I got to sell this guitar. And like he had this cool Telecaster one time, and I remember he was like,
"This seems like a sore spot."
Like, well, he was like, "I got to sell this guitar." I was like, "Oh, dude, I want that guitar." He's like, "All right, how's $700?" I was like, "No, I'm gonna give you 800." You know, so he called it Polish haggling.
It was a 50. Sorry,
and I can say that because I'm Polish.
Sure, yeah.
But anyway, he I guess you hadn't had a guitar, Matt, since then, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time. But I'll tell you, man, that Telecaster was a 52. One of the Telecasters that was called the 52 reissue.
Yeah.
That I had gotten from Fender, and it was like I had fallen in love with Tellys at one point. And I just always wanted that particular guitar, like, because obviously getting a 52 Telecaster,
right,
is not in most people's like realm of reality.
You could buy a Cadillac.
You could buy a Cadillac or a lot of things, or like more practical things. But I got that guitar and it was so great. but you know what? Whatever. It's you know, c'est la vie. Things come and go, especially with guitars.
And to be honest, I ended up selling the guitar down the line when I needed money for rent. So
I know, and then sometimes when I look on Craigslist, sometimes I'll see because Dave was in New York at the time, and like I'll see a 52 reissue on Craigslist, and I wonder, is that ours? Is that the one that was ours?
It might have been. We've all had to sell gear when money's a little tight, you know. And I've sold tons of gear that I wish I still had, but like you said, Matt, if you love it, let it go, you know.
That's right. I don't think I did say that, but I'll take credit for it.
So what did you write on now? It seems like the two singles are sort of a little more like brighter and super like infectiously catchy, especially the grooves on them and whatever. But there's some like almost baritone sounding guitar sort of later on in the album. And there's some like it's like I don't know. My knowledge of like post rock is very, very limited, but like the Bauhaus era, there's some sort of like Bauhaus Joy Division, like angular baritone guitar going on in there. Did you write just on Telecaster? I sort of geek out over stuff like this, but did you write on regular guitar, or is that baritone guitar?
No, there's no baritone in there, but I think I play really heavy strings.
Okay.
That do have like almost like a piano quality to it. Like I play like 12 gauge, you know, strings.
Yeah.
So it's like it is a little bit of a thicker sound. I also play a darker amp. Like I have this really, really amazing Vox amp that's like one of my favorite things. It's like a Vox TB35. This guy Tony Bruno, I love gear too, just like Matt does and you do. But this guy Tony Bruno, he does like these insane amps, and he was like commissioned by Vox to build this amp, and it's got a really amazing like dark, almost Fender mixed with Vox sound, and it's super British sounding. It's super American sounding at the same time, but it's a little bit on the dark mid-rangey side.
Yeah.
And I think together, and I used to play only Gibsons, and now I play only Fenders. I play Fender Strat most of the time. But the Strat with that amp with the really heavy strings almost does have a baritone sound.
Yeah.
You know, and
I'm sorry, because it's funny that you said, is there a baritone? There's not, and in fact, the guitars on the record are a Telecaster and a Stratocaster.
Okay, interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah.
But there's a lot of everything's drenched in chorus and reverb.
Yeah.
There's relatively heavy amount of fuzz. So I think like all of that stuff is probably blending together to give you that sense.
What else were you sort of listening to and inspired by as you were writing? Anything in particular? Or I know you mentioned like Rolling Stones and Stone Roses and things like that, but what else were you sort of pulling from?
I mean, for me, I love all that kind of stuff. I love Teenage Fan Club, and I love Matt and I are obsessed with British music, like like everything from like the 60s on through now. You know what I mean? Like we traveled in England a lot, and like traveled with some British bands that like I think when we were in it, like especially for me, I don't know about you, Matt, but when I was in England, I like got super obsessed with being there and being immersed in the music scene there, and like the clubs and just like the attitude of British people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they appreciate music in a different and frankly better way than I think the general American public does.
It's a smaller country. It's obviously a much smaller country. It almost reminds me of Philadelphia. Like Philadelphia loves music in a way that is different than anywhere else in America. Yeah. Like Philly's got just like this vibe, you know what I mean? Like the Explosion always did super well in Philadelphia. We did, like the Explosion did well there. The Explosion did well in England, you know, like I'm just, you know, like I think we're both just pretty enamored with that. We're enamored with the street style clothing, all that stuff, you know, like skinhead mod fashion, like all that kind of, you know, dopey shit that we just have loved since we were like basically kids, you know. Like Matt and I met each other when we were in our early 20s, and we loved American punk and stuff like that, but we love British culture too. You know what I mean?
a lot of our primary influences haven't really changed. I mean, the Jam is a huge influence. Ride and Stone Roses, all that stuff. But also, Oasis. Like, I love Oasis, and
I love Oasis.
without any shame at all, because I
No shame needed there.
no
Yeah.
shame needed, because they're one of the greatest bands of all time. And Noel Gallagher is an incredible guitarist. He's an incredible songwriter. Like, the fact that he wrote all of those songs it boggles my mind.
Right.
But there's other stuff. There's stuff that kind of sits in the middle for me, like bands like Into Another, one of my favorite bands of all time. Obviously not a new band, but the way that they kind of straddled like the kind of like hardcore world and the metal world and the kind of like post-hardcore world was super interesting, and the dynamic of that group is just awesome. The songs are awesome because of it. Coxbar, I think, is one of the most dynamic bands of all time. That's
totally.
Influence.
Sure.
Like, I was late to the party on Idols, but I started listening to Idols, like a year and a half ago. And that, like, it's just like, that music is so interesting to me. I can't even explain. Like, if you had to explain that group to someone, I think it'd be super hard. But
yeah,
it's just like a single riff and really good lyrics, and it's kind of heavy.
Yeah,
but it's kind of not at the same time. And
right.
I like that. I like that it's inexplicable.
Right. This is so I just got a warning that this is going to cut us off in 5 minutes. I want to make sure that we talk about the videos, because those videos, especially that video for Bad Luck, probably one of my favorite videos in years. Where did that concept come from? That is the crowd dance. If people haven't seen it, it's you guys effectively, I don't know where you found the video or whatever, or what it originally was, but this like festival somewhere, maybe in the late 70s or whatever. Fascinating.
Matt will tell you about it. It's all his wife, Joanna. She's basically a member of the band.
Go
ahead, Matt.
She's sitting, as we speak, upstairs right now, finishing the video for our next single that comes out. And it's awesome. That video, I can see the countdown. It's making me crazy. That video is all found footage from a Christian heavy metal festival.
That's awesome.
At some point in the 80s or early 90s. And all of those people are amazing. But the way that she used that footage is just so smart, and she's incredibly talented. And so
it fits perfectly.
I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I had the same thing that you said, Jason. I was like, this is my favorite. It probably is my favorite video of all time.
Yeah.
And I felt so lucky. I was like, holy fuck, this is amazing. It's incredible. Like, it's so hilarious. I watched it over and over. I showed my girlfriend. We howled with laughter. We thought it was so cool. Like, it's so good. I hope it gets more like traction. Like, I hope people find it like 10 years down the line and love it.
Or in a few, or now.
Or the guy in and of it, like, it's worth the price of admission. Just the guy wearing, I think he's wearing like a white tank top, and he's going, it looked like at first I thought he was like tripping his face off.
You know what I think he's doing? Praying.
That's the good Lord coming out in him.
That's the good Lord bringing you that good music.
You can kind of see towards the end, everybody's got their arms up. I went, this is like a revival thing. That just adds this whole other layer to it that's fascinating.
And Yogi Bear's in it.
Yeah.
and we revived it. We revived that moment in time, and we became a part of it. And what more could you ask for?
That is brilliant.
Hope somebody like watches it and it's like, I was at that actual show in context.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I hope they don't contact us. Probably.
Well, I hope they get the joke.
Yeah, we're gonna run out in a minute or so. The album's out March 26th. It's on Wiretap Records. It's really, really, really good. I've been listening to it a bunch. I've got my wife and my kid listening to it now too. So
awesome.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, guys. That time went by
course.
way too fast, but
I agree.
I wonder, I mean, if you're game, I might be able to just restart it, like save this and restart it.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Yeah. Let me stop this, save it, and then try to restart it.
Yeah. I'm going to go take a piss and I'll be right
Yeah.
Okay.
The funny part is that for whatever reason, and I don't know how to fix this because I'm not a Zoom technical expert, but we're in different positions now. So like halfway through, it's going to look like, I mean, it'll look like what happened is that we stopped and started over again.
Right.
That's fine. Who cares?
That's okay.
So we touched a little bit about the album, if that makes sense. But I wanted to talk about bringing the guys that you brought in. We talked about Mike and we talked about Chris and Matt Olsson, but how much lead time did you give them in terms of like, did they know the material far in advance enough to work out their own parts, or was it like kind of worked out once you got to Jersey?
Ooh, well, our plan initially was to record everything ourselves except the drums. And that was our plan leading up to, so we recorded in July. I think up until June, that was our plan. And we realized like, we're biting off a little more than we can chew. So we had engaged Mike and he was down, but he was kind of in a weird place. Like he was in a weird spot in terms of his drums because he didn't really have a place to practice. His drums were packed up and so he learned the songs the best he could. And then, so he was learning the songs the best way that he could. And then we contacted Matt and said, listen, bud, here's a situation. No, this is a little bit short notice.
Right.
Because it's a month out. But he was like, I'll give it a go. But he learned the songs in like 4 days or something and got super stoked about them and had cool ideas about them. And
and like for Bad Luck, the original demo I cut for Bad Luck, Chris Gonzalez played on down in Asbury. So I had contacted Chris about playing because he came up with some killer bass lines for that song. So I was like, I contacted Chris about playing bass on that song prior to even thinking about Matt Olsson. And so like, you know, like he basically, I had to tell Chris, I was like, well, listen, we got the map. I really want you to play bass on Bad Luck. So it was kind of like they both, you know, Matt played the rest of the songs and Chris played that one.
And Matt was so gracious about that. Like he didn't give a shit. It was super refreshing to see, just to see like that, like so willing to be collaborative and open. And yeah, it was nice. It was nice to have Chris in the studio because he just kind of jogged over.
I was gonna say he lives like around the corner from Little Eden or something, doesn't he?
Yeah,
essentially,
almost literally he does. Yeah.
Which the last time I was in Asbury, this is a couple years ago for, I don't know, something Bouncing Souls related, and as we were walking by, I don't know, I think as we were walking by the pony, I was like, oh, there goes Chris from the Lovelace. Nice. Like, oh yeah, I forgot he lives like right around the corner there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean that's kind of. I mean, frankly, I don't think that Mike. This is my assumption. This is not a knock. I think Mike didn't really have a way to learn the songs in earnest with a drum kit in front of him many times. He's just so good that he kind of he knew them by listening to them.
I was gonna say that makes it even more impressive, I think.
Yeah, it does. And to watch that is pretty special. It's pretty special to see like that level of talent.
Yeah.
In front of you.
He's the best. The best.
Yeah, I'm glad he can play drums again. He and I talked at length for that Loved Ones story about kind of everything he went through at the end of the Loved Ones and even playing drums in the first place. So it's really good that he can.
Yeah, he is the best. He's one of, well, you know, him and Andrew Black. I mean, you couldn't get much better than that. You know what I mean? Like as far as playing with the best of the best in terms of like punk rock drumming and
Yeah.
you know just general rock drumming or whatever the Space Cadet is, whatever, you know. It's like for Mike, I remember, I think Matt, I was like, we should get Mike Sneeringer, right? Like it was my suggestion to get Mike to play.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I was like, he would fucking kill this, you know, this
Yeah.
music. Cause I play in another band with him, Dark Blue, and I was like, he doesn't have to be all punk rock. Like Dark Blue is a lot slower or whatever. And I was like, he would be perfect for Space Cadet. So.
And so I know that, well, it sounds in some way like it was coming full circle to have Brian Baker come into the studio and play a guitar solo. If he was sort of one of the little catalysts that got the whole ball rolling a year and a half
Absolutely.
ago, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we knew
oh, sorry, Matt.
No, you go, please. I insist.
I was just gonna say another guy who lives around the corner in Asbury Park.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
So, did I read correctly that he sort of had a part already written? Like, did you give him the song, or did he just come down and listen and make something up? Or
no, we gave him the song because you know, like I spend a lot of time in like the Asbury Park area. In a town called Bradley Beach, which is 2 towns over.
Yeah.
I spend I used to spend an incredible amount of time there.
Yeah, right.
But it's kind of like a second home to me. And so Brian and I have become friends over the years. Dave and Brian are friends. We're all friends.
Yep.
And the last song that was written for the record, which is the next single, which is Start Running Away, had an empty part. There was a bridge that was meant to be a solo, but it had just sat empty, and it felt like it was calling for whatever it is that he can do.
Yeah,
with a guitar that has P90s in it.
Yeah.
So we asked him, and they said, "Hey, would you be down to come? Like, would you be down to play something on this part?" On this song? And he said, yeah. So we've been in contact, and he said, yeah, I'll do it. Then it got closer to the time we were going to record, and he said, you still want me to do this? I said, of course. So he came to the studio. He had been just kind of chilling all day. He came down and he said, what do you want me to do? I said, I don't know what you mean. He said, do you want me to play something that you want me to play, or do you want me to do something that I can do? Because I kind of been working on this thing. I said, I 100% want you to do whatever that is.
Right.
And he did. And I think that the amount of time that it took to record it, he was in the studio for, I think it was 23 minutes. I think I looked at the clock when he arrived and when he left, because he texted me that he was there.
Yeah.
And it was like 23 minutes. But in that 23 minutes, like, we kind of caught up. We talked about what everyone was like, what Pete and me and he were doing for summer. And then somehow like a magnificent piece of like music occurred.
Yeah, right.
And then he's like, all right, I'm gonna go home now. I got stuff to do.
Is that, I mean, I know you guys have known Brian Baker, and you mentioned that you're friendly. Is that still surreal to have Brian, to have Brian Baker play? Yeah.
Oh, I listened to Minor Threat like in 1987, and I was so afraid of the music and so enthralled by that music. You know, at the same time, like it was my favorite band, but I was also like, what is this? I was like, 12 or 13 years old in 1987 or 1988, and I was like, what? I remember getting that record with Ian MacKaye with his head down and his head shaved, and I was like, man, I think I want to shave my head, and just looking at that record and looking at like Brian, like that misfit blonde kid, you know what I mean? Like I fucking love his guitar playing, you know what I mean?
Dave,
like,
you look very good with your head shaved.
Oh, well, thank you.
You do.
Yeah, well, thanks. But I mean, like, I loved that band, like, so it is surreal to have him playing on it. But and it's slightly surreal to have him be a friend, but it's like that's what punk music is, and that's what being part of that community is. I think is to become friends with those people that you were like super excited about when you were young, and really getting that as your reality, like becoming a punk. Like it's all part of the whole thing of becoming friends with those people, and hopefully they're not shitheads. And Brian is definitely the least shithead person ever.
He is a wonderful human being. Yeah.
He is amazing. Amazing.
And I will tell you that's, I mean, I don't want to say that that's why I started doing this thing with Dying Scene 10 years ago or whatever it was now, but because I don't play out in bands and whatever, I said, I felt so detached from the community that was the punk rock that I grew up on.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, I said, well, I'm not going to join a band now. I'm married and have a kid. And it's like, those days have passed for me to be able to do that. Just kind of like, oh, I'm going to start my first band. But I said, you know what, I can do this at least as a way to sort of plug back in. And the phone numbers that I have in my phone now, just of people that I could text or whatever, it's like, it blows my mind. From thinking back to being a 12-year-old kid.
Isn't that the beauty of it? Is that it's a thing that you can be a part of no matter what?
Yeah.
Like there's no, it's really only on you if you don't become a part of it. I think that there's a lot of things, like I mentioned watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I watch all sorts of stuff. Like I watch all sorts of players, and a lot of the people, they like music that I've never listened to. They love John Mayer and they love all this stuff. And it seems so far away from them that they can only talk about it and they can't speak to being a part of it. And this is no dig on them. Like that's what they like, and that's totally cool. And I'm cool with that. Like I think we should all be cool with each other as human beings. And but there's a sadness to it when the things that we love are like attainable and they're real in that sense. In that
they're
sense
accessible.
that you can be a part of them if you try to be. And that's what's special about all of this. Whatever this is, like like you explain like punk rock on Dying Scene in your FAQ section very well. Like it's very subjective. And it can be like pretty elitist sometimes, but it's also mostly pretty inclusive.
Yeah.
And that's what's really beautiful about it.
100%.
Where did you find Dave, Minor Threat as a 12 or 13 year? You're from sort of central Massachusetts, right?
I am. Yeah.
I'm quite familiar with the town of Clinton, and I know that they used to have cool shows at the rec center or whatever, but how do you find, I grew up only 45 minutes away from there. Clinton might as well be Kansas. Because I mean, I grew up in New Hampshire, but at least it was southern New Hampshire, so it was like sort of
Nashua.
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Oh, that's where my wife's from.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I born and raised in Nashua. My parents still live there. I live in Wakefield, Massachusetts now, but but at least Nashua was sort of a city. We had Rocket Records. We had like a couple of guitar stores and whatever. So I think 12 or 13 is probably when I started listening to Minor Threat too. But to know that somebody from Clinton was listening to Minor Threat at the same time, is like, well, how did they even find out about it? We didn't have the internet.
well, yeah, it's cool. It's a kind of a cool story. Like I got really into music when I was maybe 10 years old. I really loved the Beatles. And then I had some cousins who were into Rush, and I was super into Rush, and went to see like my first concert, I think when I was at 11 years old. I went to see a Rush concert. And then like I had this friend whose name is Dave Welch. And he was into punk rock, and he has almost the same name as me. My name is Dave Walsh. His name is Dave Welch, whatever. But he loved Minor Threat. And then also my friend Jeremy had a brother, or he had two brothers that were in a really cool like alternative band called IOU from Clinton. And I used to hang out at his house all the time. And his brothers had like everything from the Replacements to the Clash to like Guadalcanal Diary and Front 242, like all this weird music, and like 10,000 Maniac, like all kinds of stuff. But Minor Threat was a tape, and I remember picking up the tape and just seeing that album cover, and putting it in there. I was like, I heard it, and it was like, and Bad Brains was there too. And I remember being like 13 and like putting it in and being like, this music is scary, but it was so exciting,
Right.
And I actually heard that before I heard like the Sex Pistols and the Clash. So it was almost like hardcore became, like, for me, was before like proper punk music. And like I was just super excited by it, and after that, like Rush kind of went away, although I still like Rush, but you know what I mean? Like in more of a nostalgic way now, but like that kind of went away. Like I still love the Beatles, whatever, but like punk was like, it was more of an identity for me, and like I really grasped onto that. And I wasn't a sports kid. I was, like it wasn't like I was like an unpopular kid or anything like that, but it was just like that was just something that really grabbed me. And
so, was there much of a scene? Like, how big was the scene out in Central Massachusetts?
There was actually kind of a lot of punks in Clinton. There was like a lot of punk kids around, not a lot, but like fair enough for someone like me who wanted to like find out about it. There was enough kids around. And then we did have that place in Clinton called the St. John's Gym. And you work in Clinton sometimes still, right?
I used to, I have switched roles, but I used to have to go out to Clinton for trainings at the building that's right in front of the St. John's Gym, that old armory.
So like that place had like the punks, as punks do when they're really young, they like, if there's not shows, they make shows happen. So like that was the place to go. They would rent the PA, they would put out flyers. There was like a record store like on High Street Clinton called Main Street Music. And like kids would come, and like we got some pretty crazy shows. Like Fugazi played, like really great shows. Like
there were awesome shows there. I never went, but there were awesome shows there.
So tons of kids would come out. Like when Fugazi played, like there was probably like 500 to 700 people there in like basically like a gymnasium. Like it just, when I was that young, it seemed like an endless amount. It seemed like a Rush concert almost. You know what I mean? Like there was endless amounts.
Clinton's
of
not there. Clinton's not it's not a big town, but it's also not a small town. It is super interesting. But to all of a sudden have 700 people like that show up, it means something. It's certainly confusing to a lot of the residents, I presume.
And it is interesting. It's so different than the way things are now. Like there was no internet then, and there was no it was all just word of mouth, really. So
how about you, Matt? Where's yours? I don't know where you're from. What was your sort of experience, your formative years?
I'm from outside of Philadelphia. Originally. Then moved to Boston in 1996. But my way to Minor Threat was Social Distortion's Story of My Life, because it was a video on MTV, if you remember.
Sure. 120 minutes probably.
Yeah, but it's funny because that song, like they would play that song in the morning actually.
That's how you knew it was a big deal.
I stumbled upon it one morning. And like, what a lucky thing, because that song's incredible, that band's incredible, but that started me on the path. I mean, like I think the next thing, like once I found there were like 3 kids that listened to that music in my middle school, and one of them gave me Minor Threat, and that was that. I mean, so those are like, I mean, it's hard to like say favorite bands, but like, most important bands are probably Social Distortion and Minor Threat. But I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and then Damien from The Explosion and I have been best friends since we were in high school. And he's a lot smarter than me and had some idea of what he wanted to do. So he's like, I'm going to go to art school in Boston. So I went to college at Temple University for like a semester and failed out. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to go to Boston.
Yeah.
So I moved to Boston with nothing.
Yeah.
Moved into a house. Damien basically was like, I know some people. We're going to live in a house. I said, that sounds great. I'm there. So we moved in. It was a house at 38 Calumet Street in Mission Hill. And Dave was my roommate. I'd never met him. I moved in the morning. He moved in the night.
That's awesome.
And John LaCroix lived on the third floor from 10 Yard Fight. It's Extent Fanzine at the time, and then 10 Yard Fight.
Yep.
Anthony Papalardo lived there. A guy named Rob Shore lived there from New Jersey. A guy named Alex K. Dean Barcelonis from the band 454 Big Block. I don't know if you remember that band.
Wow. Yeah, that's a name I haven't heard in 25 years.
That guy is, we've lost touch, unfortunately, but he's one of my favorite people of all time.
Yeah.
And that house was incredible. Clevo, who ended up playing in 10 Yard Fight, lived there. Like, it's just like this weird, insane, cool place. Rama Mayo was our roommate who did Big Wheel Recreation.
Yep.
Who we remained friends with for many years.
My friend, he was the one who got me, like, he's from Central Mass too. Rama got me into that house, you know, like I would see him in shows like around Central Mass and Worcester and stuff. And he and I were friendly, and I was in college at the time at UMass Amherst, and I was going to come to Boston my junior year to do like an internship at the EPA. And he was like, oh, you should move into this house. And there's like these cool kids from Philadelphia that are moving up, and it's going to be like a cool punk house. And, you know, I think my rent was like $300 a month. And I was like, all right, I'm in, you know, and
I think it was less. My rent was $217, and you shared a room. So I think your rent might've been $150.
Those were the days.
I think you're right. I think that was because I shared a room with my friend Heath Wright from Clinton. And yeah, it was 300, but we split it. It was 150 each. Yeah.
Those were the days.
They were.
Yeah. 96.
What's funny is that I moved to the city in 97 to go to college. I was like a mile down the street from you guys. No idea.
No way.
Yeah.
Found that out right now. Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Northeastern my first 2 years. So
you were right there.
I was right there. Yeah.
Where were you living?
I was living on campus on St. Stephen's Street at
right
Northeastern.
There. Yeah. So it's funny because I went to visit Dave the Christmas of 2019, December 19th, because I remember the day before was Dave's birthday. I went up on the 19th because we were going to work on music. And I wanted to spend a night in Boston. So I got a hotel room at the Hilton or whatever, just whatever the cheapest room I could get in the Prudential Center. So I got on the E train and I rode the train, and I was like, you know, I used to do this every day. And I got on the Green Line, and like 6 minutes later, I was at Brigham Circle, and I walked up the hill and saw 38 Calumet Street. Then I went to Flint Ryan's and got a pint of Guinness, just doing like weird nostalgic. I was like in a moment, you know, like a kind of emotional moment.
Right.
But what's incredible, what struck me is so incredible is that what was basically a slum was 6 minutes away from the heart of this like major metropolitan area. And somehow the Northeastern hadn't figured out while we were there that if they just go up Huntington Avenue 1 mile, there's all this stuff, but they hadn't figured that out.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Like it's a weird kind of like, you could do a whole like dive into gentrification and all that shit, but
especially that neighborhood.
Especially that neighborhood. But it's so close.
Right.
And it never struck me. I think because things are relative. I live in Brooklyn now. I work in Manhattan. The relativity wasn't there at the time, and it seemed like, okay, well now I go to this, I have to go all the way down and then go all the way home, but it's so close. it's wild.
That was sort of one of the things they tell you moving into Northeastern. I mean, I knew the area a little bit because I'm from not far away, but it's sort of one of the things they tell you is that like, like, you know, if you're familiar with the Lion King movie, so there's like all the area the light can see, that's ours, Simba, but like where the light doesn't reach, like you're not supposed to go there. Like
Yeah.
Mission Hill was essentially that. They're like don't really go past, like at orientation, I remember them telling us, if you're on Huntington Ave, like don't really go past Mass Art and the MFA, because after that, it gets a little dicey.
Yeah, that's where
they're like, don't
right
go
away.
to Mission Hill, don't go to Hyde Park, don't really go out the backside of campus through Roxbury. Like stay here.
Yeah.
That's what we chose
knew
to move. Yeah.
Yeah. And now
it was great. I loved living there. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, I lived in Washington Square at one point too, and that was a whole other world too, you know, like,
yeah.
But anyway.
Dudley Square?
Yeah, Dudley Square. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Again, that's a neighborhood that, I mean, it's still Dudley Square, but it is not the Dudley Square that it used to be 25 years ago. Having just driven through there a couple of weeks ago.
Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I don't know, but
I think a little of
that
both.
era was pretty special for us.
Yeah. If things go according to plan, whatever plan is there, do you have the idea to take Space Cadet on the road at some point? If things sort of shake out and we all get vaccinated and wear masks, or
100%. Hopefully vaccinated and no masks.
Well,
yeah.
I just mean like for as long as we have to do. Like
Yeah, definitely want to play some shows for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna do as much as we can. I mean, our lives are a little bit complicated. You know, we work to support our lives, and
we have families and all that.
Yeah. However, you know, we'll do as much as we can. That is possible. So yes. So in terms of plans, you're right. It's impossible to make them now. The word is basically meaningless. But we do plan on playing shows. We do plan on
Joanna just sent me a text.
Oh, she did? What does it say?
She said, please stay
up until the video is done. I'm almost done.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So the new video is
on its way. Jason will send it right to you immediately.
That's awesome.
Yes, we will send it to you, in fact.
That's awesome. I can't wait. She did both of the videos. I know we talked about.
Yeah,
the one,
she's done. She did both of them and is now doing the third. She's from Nashua. A place that creates beautiful people, apparently.
Well, there's a couple of us. I still like it there.
Joanna is our art director for the band for sure. She did the album cover art. She's done everything.
Yeah. Nashua puts out some creative people.
They do.
Absolutely.
Her and me and Mandy Moore, I think.
That's it. Yeah. There you go. What more do you need? Awesome. What Mandy Moore do you need?
Yeah. And she only lived there for like 2 months, but whatever.
Whatever. Yeah, we plan to do as much as we can to
it won't
answer
be
questions succinctly.
It's not just a studio band. Like
no.
There's a similar sort of side project. I was having a discussion a little bit about Space Cadet with a friend of mine who plays in the band Face to Face, and he had a side project that's not really active anymore, but Scott and Trevor from Face to Face and Scott's brother Chris and a couple other buddies a few years ago, 15 years ago at this point, put together a little like baritone. They bought baritone guitars, essentially. Chris and Scott and Trevor all bought baritone guitars, and they wanted to write like Killing Joke style.
Nice.
Like Peter Murphy tones on tape, like that sort of style stuff that they couldn't do as Face to Face. So they did this project called Viva Death, and like the Space Cadet, which I loved their project, and I love Scott. He's one of my favorite people. But like this project sort of reminded me of that same sort of like, we can take these guys that you know from all these punk rock projects, and they're going to put out something that's like, it's the same guys, but it's totally different. It's a different sound, and it's really cool and fun. And whatever. So this project reminded me of that, which was a long way of saying that.
We toured with Face to Face.
We have.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I
It
saw
was
it together. I've seen
a
Face to
long
Face
time ago.
more than I have seen anybody.
I remember we played with them in Idaho.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been
And-
there.
And there was a potato sack involved.
That was with AFI. I think we toured. I think we did a tour, if I'm not mistaken. My memory sucks, but I think we did a tour with H2O and Face to Face that we
Oh,
opened.
right.
Right, you're right. You're right.
Oh, I think that was like, was that maybe a West Coast leg?
And
'Cause
maybe it was like a 2-week thing.
I
It
want to
wasn't
say,
a proper tour.
I want to say when that came here, though, I think Face to Face and H2O came here as well. But I want to say maybe Snapcase and somebody
Yeah.
else.
I think they picked up someone who was drawing some more people.
Like, I think actually early Dashboard Confessional, when it was like just Chris Carrabba and an acoustic guitar. I want to say
Oh,
he
okay.
was on like this part of that tour too.
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
I think it was one of those kind of segmented tours where like the tour's national, but
Mhm.
they do like regional, which is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. We're gonna run out
All
of time
right.
again, but thanks for doing this, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
I've
Yeah,
been
for
fans of both
sure.
of yours for a long time, and I hope people buy the Space Cadet album. I know
Me
that
too.
I think pre-orders are up, or if they're not up now, they're up soon or whatever. But
They're up.
people should buy it. It's really cool. It's fun.
We agree.
Thank you, man.
Like I told you, those two singles are two of the catchiest songs that I've heard in a while, and they don't sound
Awesome.
like the rest of the album. It's really dark and gritty and fun. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Well, thank you for saying so, man. This was awesome.